folks. It looks like we're reaching a critical mass here, so I'm going to get started. Um, Hi, my name is Graham MacDonald. I'm our Chief Data Officer here at the Urban Institute, and I'm very excited to have you here today to talk about a recent launch of our summary endpoints for the Education Data Portal here at the Urban Institute. Since we launched the Education Data Portal a few years ago, we've been really grateful to have folks like you be a part of our community, using data on the portal to generate insights and data and evidence that we hope will lead to actionable policy that can improve student outcomes. And I'm just here to introduce the team and get out of the way and set some ground rules, and then I'll pass it along to our presenters to start the presentation shortly. Again, my name is Graham. I lead our data science and data engineering teams as the Chief Data Officer. I have with me today Erica Blum, who's a senior research associate at the Education Data and Policy Center, and Kyle Wayama, who's our lead data engineer in the Office of Technology and Data Science, who will be your two presenters today. We also have Matt Chingos, who's the Vice President of the Education Data and Policy Center here at the Urban Institute. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there were a number of amazing people, both in our teams in the Office of Technology and Data Science and the Education Data and Policy Center, but also in our communications team and other folks throughout Urban that were huge contributors both to this webinar today, but also to the portal and making all of this happen. So a big thank you to them. With that said, I'd like to advance to the next slide if we could and talk about some of the ground rules for this presentation. Again, you'll see that little recording button at the top left of the screen. This event is being recorded and the recording will be posted online afterward. You can hide the captions or adjust the settings with the live transcript button, which if you move your mouse should be on the bottom right of your screen. All participants are muted, so you can try talking, but we won't hear you. Please type your questions or comments into the Q&A box, which again is at the bottom of the screen toward the middle. As you move your mouse, you can see that Q&A button appear. I will be taking those questions and we'll be answering them after the presentation. So we're going to run through the presentation and then I'll answer them afterward. And at that time, we will hopefully have a great discussion and be able to answer a bunch of questions from you all, both from our presenters or from my point of view. And then we'll wrap it up. So with that, I will pass it along to Erica, who will kick us off for the presentation.
Thanks so much, Graham. As Graham mentioned, I'm Erica Blum. I'm a senior research associate in the Education Data and Policy Center at Urban. And I'm going to give you just a quick overview of the Education Data Portal. Some of you may be already familiar with this, but some of you may not. So this will be a quick overview, and then I'll pass it along to Kyle, who will do the introduction to the summary endpoints and a quick demonstration. And then, as Graham mentioned, we'll answer any of your questions. So the Education Data Portal is meant to be a one-stop shop for all of the publicly available data on schools, school districts, and colleges. So these are all government-collected national data sets that are already available to the public, but they haven't been standardized over time. They're all on different websites. And so we've tried to put them all in one place so that people can access them more easily. So these are not student level data, it's institution level data. And these institutions, the schools and colleges, are linked to geographies such as neighborhoods, counties, and cities. On the PK-12 side, we have data on school enrollment, demographics, teachers, test scores, student discipline, finance, course offerings, and more. So these are at the school and school district level. At the colleges level, we have data on institutional characteristics, admissions, enrollment, demographics, retention, graduation, degrees by major, finance, tuition and financial aid, post-college earnings, and student loan repayment. As mentioned, these data are linked to geographic data by longitude and latitude. So we've put each school and college into a census tract and block, which we've then been able to link to cities and towns, congressional districts, state legislative districts, and metropolitan areas. How can you access these data? Luckily, we have lots of different tools depending on your background. So you can access the data via the API. You can download data directly. My preferred method is to use one of our Stata or R packages that were recently added to SSE and CRAN respectively, or you can use our point and click tool, the Data Explorer. If you want to follow along, you can navigate to educationdata.urban.org/documentation. And I think that link has also been shared in the chat. So this is the documentation site. You can see on the top right corner, it's divided into schools, school districts, and colleges. We're right now on the schools page. On the left-hand side here, you'll see what we call endpoints. So these are the different, you can think of them as data sets or sub-data sets organized by data source. So you can see here we have directory, enrollment, discipline, harassment, bullying, etc. In the center, we have all of the data information on the data itself. So what variables are available. Some of them have tooltips with a little bit more information, variable labels, and then any special values that these variables may take on. On the right-hand side, you have all of our access tools. So this will give you information about how to access these data via Stata, R, Python, JavaScript, or just by downloading the data separately for each endpoint. So for example, you can access the data directly via the API if you code in Python or JavaScript or presumably other languages, and you can just access those data directly. You can also just download an entire data set. So this will come to you as a CSV and separately with a code book that you can also download. But as I mentioned, my preferred method is to use the Stata education data package. So you can install this in 2 easy steps. First, you install the libjson package that undergirds this, and then just SSC install education data. Once you have that installed, the commands to download the data are really, really easy. It's just 1 line of code, education data using, and then you want to indicate the topic. So here, school, the source, which is in this case CCD, and then the endpoint. So here I've chosen the directory. Optionally, you can subset the data. So for example, I've chosen charter schools here. You can select a single year or range of years, and then clear if you have any data in memory. So the nice thing about these packages is that it labels the values and variables for you. You don't have to run a separate do file. It will just all appear like magic in your Stata window. Some tips, if you're downloading a lot of data this way, we recommend using the CSV option, which will make it a lot faster. Some of the data sets are in long format. So for example, if the data are broken down by race or grade or sex or some combination of those are going to each appear as a separate line. So you may want to use reshape depending on what you're using the data for. You can access lots of information on the education data help page in Stata. You can also reach out to me at educationdata@urban.org. And just for another quick example of the Stata education data package, this one is using the college's data. So education data using college IPEDS grad rates. I picked a specific unit ID, which is for the University of Washington, a 20-year range, and a particular subcohort. I also subsetted to particular fields that I wanted. So I didn't need all the variables, so I just chose these 4. And I was able to make a chart pretty easily with those data. We also have an R package that you can install equally easily from the CRAN library. And then it's a similar syntax where you indicate the level, the source, the topic, any by variables, any filters, and then whether you want to add the labels. And finally, we have our point and click tool, which we call the Education Data Explorer. Again, this is broken down into schools, school districts, and colleges. So you can choose one of those. In our example here, we have selected schools. And similarly, you will choose a time frame, a geography, and then within that, you can either choose all the schools, or you can choose specific schools or specific types of schools, for example, by level or type. So here we've chosen Seton Elementary School in the District of Columbia. Then you can navigate to choose your data, and you'll see a bunch of drop-down menus where you can choose the variables that you would like to download. And then you navigate to the top right corner to click Generate, and you will end up with several data sets. So you'll get one CSV file that contains your data dictionary, one school level file, and in this case, we also got a file broken down by race because we asked for some information broken down by race. So that will appear in a separate CSV file. I will now pass it on to Kyle. And again, any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. I'm getting control of the slides now, so bear with me 1 second while I get that set up. But anyway, Erica gave us a great overview of the education data portal and all the data that's available. She went through that list of schools, school districts, college, university. There's just a wealth of information that's available. And so now I'm going to talk about the summary endpoint functionality that we built out. The first that I'll start with is our motivation for doing so. So kind of, what is the summary endpoints? Why did you build it? You already have this great functionality in the API. What are we trying to accomplish with this new functionality? And so our first motivation is that retrieving complete raw data sets from the Education Data Portal API can be very time consuming, especially depending on what source you may be trying to look at. So I think one of our most popular ones that we see used a lot is that school CCD enrollment data set. If you were trying to look at all of the data across all years for that particular endpoint, you start getting into the range of tens of millions, it may even be hundreds of millions of records that you need to first download and then analyze. And that can be very time consuming for the user. But if all you're interested in is some certain summary statistics, some researchers may want the complete raw data sets for the sake of their own research. But for other users, they may just be looking for insights and not looking to do the whole analysis process themselves. So our second motivation for this functionality is to take that burden of data collection and analysis and remove it for the user who just wants a quick insight that the data can provide. So instead of trying to download everything, knowing how to use something like Excel or Stata or R in order to analyze it, being able to give that insight very quickly in a consistent manner and not putting that burden of the research process onto someone who's not looking to do that. Third motivation, this is a bit self-serving, is that it can help improve overall portal performance. So part of my work as lead data engineer is I have a dashboard and I see all the resources being consumed by the education data portal, and I check it out once a day or so. And I can tell when there's maybe a researcher or a couple of researchers who are trying to download a lot of data. You see the CPU usage go up, you see the database performance go up. But if all you're looking to do is get summary endpoint or summary analysis, instead of pulling in all the data from the API onto your machine, we can just do that aggregation and summarization for you. We can help improve overall performance and leave those computational resources for someone else who may want to download full data sets. The fourth motivation is now with this new functionality, we can give that insight to you within seconds as opposed to hours. I did a test of one of our endpoints saying, if I wanted to download every single year of the school CCD enrollment data, how long would it take? The answer was I think 6 hours on my machine, but my internet connection was maybe a bit spotty. The point is, if you're looking for a quick insight, we can now provide that for you. So instead of having to spend half a day or a full day trying to get all this data just to do a quick analysis, that can be available to you incredibly quickly now with this new functionality that we've built out. Finally, the data have been pre-joined with their corresponding directory file. So as Erica mentioned, she listed off various geographic identifiers that our different data sets have been joined against, but those are actually going to end up in a separate endpoint if you're going off of the raw data API. So if you were trying to get the school's enrollment data and you wanted to look at congressional district, you'd actually have to go and pull all that directory information as well, do a join, and then do the summarization. with the summary endpoint functionality, we actually do that pre-join against the quote unquote directory file for you. So now you have even more variables uh, to play with for your analysis. I think for most endpoints, it is called directory file. I think for if you use the college university data, it's called institutional characteristics or something along those lines. All right, so what does the format of a summary endpoint look like? That base API URL remains the same. So we were showing before, you might go to schools/ccd/enrollment. That part stays exactly the same. And now at the end, we're just going to tack summaries onto the end of it to open up that new functionality. After that, we're also going to give the additional parameters for the type of summarization we want. So the first is going to be stat, and this is just the summary statistics that you want to return. And so the options that we currently support are sum, count, average, min, max, variance, standard deviation, and median. Var is the variable that you want to have summarized for you. Must be a numeric variable, obviously. By, this is the variable, or it could be multiple variables that you want to group your results by. So you may want enrollment numbers by FIPS code, or maybe you want them by race and sex. And so that's just going to be a comma separated race, comma sex as an argument. And finally, filters. This is how you want to filter down the data set before doing that type of summary. So say you were only interested in I think that's Colorado. So you could say, I only want these results where FIPS code equals 8, or maybe you want to filter it down. I want this for where FIPS code equals 6 and the race code equals 2. And that can be done as well with this parameter. All right, so taking that format, let's go ahead and build out a quick example just to give a sense of what the summary endpoint is going to return. So I'm going to take some of that information from the last slide and just build out what this URL will look like. So we're doing schools, CCD, enrollment, summaries, and then we're saying the stat is sum, var is enrollment, by is FIPS, and race is 2. And so that's saying I want to retrieve summary data from school CCD enrollment, and I want the sum of the enrollment variable grouped by FIPS code and where race is equal to 2. So finally, as Erica mentioned, that URL, it's kind of a lot to take in. You may not be interested in trying to construct a whole bunch of URLs just to get the power of the summary endpoint functionality. Our R and Stata packages are now kind of on their official channels. So the R package is available on CRAN. You can get that with install.packages education data. Stata, this is available on SSC. So you need to do SSC install libjson and then SSC install education data. And so for both of our software packages, we've actually added in functionality that can retrieve from the summary endpoints as well, as in addition to the previous functionality of retrieving all the raw data from the API. So you get a bit of a 2-for-1 in that case. All right, now we'll do a demonstration of what the summary endpoint functionality looks like in practice. We're not going to do a live demo just because you never know what might happen. So these will all be a bit pre-recorded and I'll walk through what's happening. First, I'll just show what happens in the web browser, just so you can see that URL that we constructed together, what that looks like in practice. And then after that, I'll do a demonstration of the Stata and R packages as well. So we're going to go via our web browser, taking that API that we constructed on the last slide. I'm on the education data portal itself, and I'm on the API version 1, and I'm putting in schools, CCD, enrollment, and now we're opening up that summary functionality. And once again, we're saying I want the statistic where it's sum, I want that for the enrollment variable, and I want that by FIPS code. I go ahead and hit enter, and within a couple of seconds, formatting gets a little weird, but now we have all of that aggregated, summarized data for you. Took a couple of seconds as opposed to trying to download all the raw data directly from the API. If you've ever used the raw data API before, you would know by that amount of time, you probably wouldn't even get a single grade year combination done in the amount of time it took for me to enter this URL and retrieve the data that way. All right, our second example is going to be via the Stata package. And I cheated a bit here because my Stata skills are not that great anymore, so I just copy and pasted the command. But like Erica demonstrated before, we're using education data using, this part stays the same as the raw data endpoints. So in this case, I'm going to say, give me school districts. Let's go to CCD, and let's do that enrollment variable again. And then after that, we have a comma. We have this kind of subquery functionality. And now we're opening up summaries. So we're saying sum of enrollment by grade, and then that clear option just in case I had anything already in memory. I go ahead and hit enter, and we already have results over on the right-hand side. You see we have year, grade, and enrollment variables for us to use. I'll go ahead and tab year since that was the only stated command I could remember in the moment, but I'm sure the rest of you could do much more interesting data analysis with this package. All right, our final set of examples are all going to use the R package just because that's the one I built and I'm most familiar and comfortable with. So we're going to kind of build up some of the additional functionality we have available for you to use. So in this case, once again, to get the package, it's now on CRAN. You can install .packages education data, and I'm just going to get that loaded into my R session. There's a second function available now. Before it was just get education data to pull from the raw API. Now we also have a summary functionality. The rest of the arguments stay pretty much the same. So level, source, topic. In this case, we're going to say schools, CRDC enrollment. And now adding in those additional summary parameters. So I'm saying I want the sum of enrollment CRDC, and I want that done by FIPS code. I'll go ahead and enter that in. And once again, within only a couple of seconds, we have that summarized data loaded into our R session, ready to use. You can go ahead and make a visualization. I think Erica showed a visualization in one of her prior slides. So now instead of having to pull in the data, do that analysis to make the visualization, you would have that data right there for you to make graphs within a matter of seconds as opposed to minutes or hours it may have taken before. All right, I'm going to build up a little bit more functionality. So how would I go ahead and use those different filter variables? So I'm going to go ahead and start with that previous query we just ran. Once again, school CRDC enrollment. And if I want to filter, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it a list. And that list is going to contain both the variable and the value that I want to have filtered by. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and filter for FIPS codes 6 through 8. Apparently, FIPS code 7 doesn't actually correspond to anything. I think it's a holdover, but I go ahead and run that. We get the data, and you see I have data now only for FIPS 6 and 8 for all years. So what if I want to include multiple filters? Well, then to that list of filters, we're just going to add the additional variables and values you want. And you can keep doing this. I don't think there's actually really a limit to how many you can do, although your analysis may get constrained at that point. But in this case, I'm going to just build upon that list of filters. So we're going to keep that FIPS code 6 to 8. And now let's just go ahead and sub this to only the year 2013. So that's what I went ahead and put in. And you see now down at the bottom, our data set just has those 2 rows for us. Finally, if we want to group by multiple variables, we can do that as well. You see in the command that we've been running so far, it's just been by, and we set that equal to FIPS. If I want to do multiple group by variables, I'm going to go ahead and pass it in a vector of the variable name. So I'm going to say by FIPS, and in this case, I'm going to do race as well. And we'll go ahead and submit that. And now you see we have one more column here. So we have year, race, FIPS, and then the enrollment. And they have that summary available for us. So that took care of the demonstration. One thing I will say quickly is if you're trying out either the R package, all those demonstrations that I just shown with the R package would be available for you in this data package as well using similar syntax. And in either case, if you have any questions, just reach out and let us know. We're always happy to help with anything you may be trying to run on the API.
Thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Erica, for walking through that great presentation. We had a few questions come up, and I will emphasize what Kyle and Erica have already said, which is that we are available at educationdata@urban.org. Kyle mentioned some of the, and Erica mentioned some of the packages that we developed, and you could see the links that we put in the chat. Those are GitHub pages for those of you who are technically savvy and want to leave us issues with any of those packages as questions. Kyle will be more than happy to take a look into them and answer any of those questions there as well. But we do have a few questions I wanted to walk through, and I think the first one is for either Erica or Matt, asking, is there any plan to add any school or neighborhood segregation metrics, especially as it relates to the work that Urban has done on the topic to the portal?
I can speak to that. So there's no plan to add any neighborhood level information. As Erica mentioned in the overview, the unit of analysis in the data portal is schools, districts, and colleges. So it's not a data point on schools, districts, or colleges. There's really no current good way for us to put the data into the portal. As it sounds like the questioner knows, we do have some school level data on how individual schools contribute to segregation. We really felt like those data needed a lot of context for people to understand them, which is why we built a data visualization tool that provides those data kind of separate from the data portal. So we have no immediate plans to integrate them into the data portal, but down the road, as we do more work on segregation at both the pre-K-12 and higher education levels, there may be opportunities for us to augment the data portal in that way.
Thanks, Jeremy, for asking that question. I don't know if you have a follow-up. Feel free to enter it into the Q&A or the chat if you do. The next question comes from Sarah asking, does this, the portal, I'm assuming, does the portal also include data on community colleges and private schools? So I don't know, Erica, if you want to take that or...
Sure. Yes. So the universe of colleges and universities includes all Title IV eligible colleges and universities, which is so Title IV is Pell Grants, student loans. So any institutions that accept those kinds of federal aid are included in the portal, including private nonprofit and private for-profit colleges. If you're asking about private K-12 schools or pre-K-12 schools, those are not yet in the portal. We have all public schools, including charter schools, and we've talked about in the future including the private school survey as well, which doesn't cover the whole universe of private schools, and we just have to think about how to integrate that. But that's definitely something we're considering.
Great, thanks, Erica, and thanks, Sarah, for asking that question. And again, if you have follow-ups, please enter it into the Q&A, and we'd be happy to answer them. We have one for Kyle on the API. Does the API require a client key? And if not, what was the decision behind not hiring one? I think requiring one. I can answer the second question, but the first one should be straightforward.
So the first question, no, the API does not require a client key. It is open for everyone to use and test out. And then, I don't know, I think I know the answer to the second one, but Graham, if you want to go with the official answer.
Sure. So we did actually discuss quite a bit around not requiring an API key. Right now, our stance is, we are monitoring the API, as Kyle said. He takes a look at it and sees who's using it. And if we do see signs of abuse, we will certainly consider requiring a key in the future. We want to make it as easy to use for people as possible to be able to get started really quickly and see the value. So, part of that decision was to make it as easy as possible. Given the fact that we haven't experienced problems with limiting at this point, there has been, as Kyle said, some heavy use, but we would like to solve the problem to allow more people to be able to use the data, as was evidenced by one of Kyle's motivations for the summary endpoints, rather than to make the solution limiting and making it potentially harder for people to use the data. All right, thank you, Rob, for that question. I have another question here for you, Kyle. Great stuff. All right. I always like to hear that. What technology stack are you using to underpin this platform? For example, how are you storing the data? So just a general question about technology platform and how you put this together.
Oh, sure. From one Kyle to another, love talking technology. So, so the raw data API itself, as Erica mentioned, there's a CSV option. So the first thing is that all of the raw data is stored as CSV files, and that's going to be hosted on Amazon S3, and then we provide those links to you through the data portal API. For the raw data endpoints that are not using the CSV option, that's just hosted on a MySQL database. So you run the query and it just comes through, and we use Django to power everything in that way. For the summary endpoint technology, so the data analytic part is done through, we use Cloudera platform, and we use what is called Impala. It's an analytic database engine. It's a distributed analytic database engine. So we can have multiple large machines running in the cloud that run this database software. So that's how we're able to power the summary functionality and provide that insight back to you so quickly. We're using multiple machines now instead of just one. And in that case, the data storage also makes a big difference. So we're using a format called Parquet. So it's kind of optimal for these type of analytic processes. So it's stored in a columnar way, and we're able to partition it by year. And so we're able to take advantage of both the compression and the strong metadata that Parquet uses to really power these quick summary statistics. So that especially is handy in terms of using something like the filters or the various group by statements. So Parquet can go through and look at exactly kind of the block of data that we want summarized, look at only that block, do the analysis very quickly, and then return the results back.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. I think this is a Matt question we have next, asking an unrelated question to the summary endpoints about our data portal proposal process and timeline for hearing back about that process. So I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk a little bit about what that is, given we didn't talk about it today, and then answer that question.
Happy to respond, and appreciate folks who responded to that call for proposals. We got sort of an overwhelming amount of interest, more than we anticipated. So it's taken us a while to get through those proposals, and lots of great ideas in there. And unfortunately, can't move forward with all of them, but we appreciate the effort they put into them. And if you sent us something, you will hear back from us. So if you haven't heard, it just means we haven't gotten through all of them yet and communicated a decision. So you will hear something from us. I would expect that everyone should hear back, I would say, hopefully by the end of this week, but possibly into next week. So if you haven't heard anything, say by a week from today, just follow up, shoot us an email to educationdata@urban.org, and we'll see why you haven't heard back. But appreciate your patience on that.
And as Matt said, really appreciate all the high quality proposals that have come in, and thanks for your patience. So I have another question here from Aaron on our commitment to maintaining R and Stata packages and concerning about building workflows using packages that may not be updated in the future. I take a part of that, which is that we are thinking about, from our technology and data science perspective, ensuring that we do have long-term maintenance of these packages and on data updates, which is a question I want to field to Erica as a result of this. But Kyle, I don't know if you want to answer how you think about maintaining these packages and how we have maintained them in the past and are committed to doing so going forward.
Sure, absolutely. Our first goal is to be as responsive as we can to the research community using these packages. I know firsthand the annoyance when something is not maintained, so we do make a conscious effort to keep things up to date. One thing about the Stata and R packages is we made a very conscious effort when we were first building these packages to go off of the robust metadata system that we have powering the API as well. And it took a bit more work to get things up and running now, but it's paid a lot of dividends later on. So now whenever Matt and Erica and team update the raw data on the API, and especially whenever a new data source is added, both the R and Stata packages will just pull directly from that new metadata and open up that functionality. So in most cases, I think the past however many releases it's been since we first had these packages up, whenever there's been either additional years of data or completely new endpoints altogether, we actually haven't had to do anything to update the Stata and R packages. At this point, it's all any maintenance is really just going to be any bug fixes that researchers come across and point us to, which we always try to be responsive to, or even better, any additional functionality that may be warranted. I think one of the first ones we did was adding in those variable labels so things of that nature. But in terms of kind of overall maintenance, the goal was that as long as the portal itself is updated and maintained with that metadata that we use, then both those packages should work, and the hope is seamlessly.
Great, thank you, Kyle. I think that's a good response to Aaron. But Aaron, if you have a follow-up question to that, please ask. Erica, if you could just talk a little bit about data updates, I think related to that question and sort of how we've gone about that and how we're thinking of going about that, I think that'd be helpful as well.
Sure, we try to update the major data sets as quickly as possible. So we're currently working on the Common Core of Data update, which should be released by next week. This is the data for schools and school districts. It includes the directory, enrollment, and finance information. And so those were published by NCES, I think in April. And so we're trying to be work as quickly as possible to get those out. And so we'll be working to sort of increase our speed of updating as we continue to build our capacity.
I think that's right. And I would add, I want to pass this one off to Matt to see if he has anything to add on the long-term vision for this question, because I think that's part of the long-term commitment here. But one of the things I will say to that is that I think we've been working really hard to add a lot of new data sets over the past few years to the portal. And so, now that we have so many amazing data sets that are already out there, I think our focus is definitely much more now on making sure we get more contemporary updates up to the portal and make that available. But just due to the amazing amount of requests that people have had for adding new data, including the great ones we've gotten today, I think we wanted to make sure that we were responsive to having that broad set of data sets. And now hopefully we'll be getting toward that more timely release schedule in the future. Matt, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that long-term vision.
This is just thinking about the portal more broadly. This is a resource that seems like folks are using it. We get good usage and more every month, and something we want to maintain and in perpetuity, at least as long as folks find it useful, if we can. Of course, that's dependent on there being funders to support this. It's obviously a resource we make available for free to the field and have no intent of changing that, but we do need continued funding. And one way you all can help with that is, well, I guess you could Venmo us or something, but that's not what I'm going to ask you for right now. What I'm going to ask you for right now is to let us know when you use the data portal. Let us know how you're using it. Let us know how it helps you have a bigger impact in your work, how it makes your work easier, because that's information we can take to our funders. Because once again, they're not investing in this because this is going to make a profit for anybody. We're a nonprofit. Funders are investing in this because they see it as a vital resource to the field, and a field that can increase the impact of data and evidence in education policy decisions and education policy research. So if folks are out there using it and don't tell us, well, then it means it's having more impact, than we're able to communicate back to the folks who we want to keep supporting this work. So you can email us anytime, educationdata@urban.org, even if just to say, hey, I published this paper, or even if there's no public product, but hey, this was really helpful. It enabled me to put together some information quickly for my boss, who's a state senator or a member of Congress or a school superintendent or an assistant school superintendent. And it was really helpful as part of this broader decision-making process. Those stories, which we can hold internally and keep confidential if you want us to, are really going to be helpful to us. And if you do have something that's more public, a publication, for example, we'll highlight that to our data portal newsletter list and help other folks know about the great work you're doing. So really, anything you can do to tell us about how this portal is helpful to you really will help increase the chances of us being able to keep doing this work, which I fully expect we'll be able to do with your help.
That's a great point, Matt. And I would echo that sentiment and say that we are committed to the extent possible that to make this as easy of an experience for folks to use, and at the same time that knowledge that we're not requiring registration or API keys or onerous language around use. We make this very freely available under an Open Data Commons license, and all we ask is some of that attribution or letting us know what you do in response. We're really grateful for you to reach out to us at the channels that Matt mentioned, or any way you can get in touch with us. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think at this point I may wrap it up unless there's any last. Oh, I see a last minute one come in. There we go. as an intern, do I have the same access to data, and can I use it for personal research too if I cite you and let you know? I think that's a pretty straightforward one. Erica, do you want to take that?
Yes, of course. We don't ask, what you're using the data for, who you are. If you're a particularly adept 5-year-old and you want to download the data, that you're welcome to. Yeah, anybody can use these data. There's no restrictions to access.
Erica, interns are older than 5, so I think you should. That was offensive.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Lauren, for asking that question. That was a good one. I will say thank you, everyone, for attending today. I think we're wrapping up unless I get any more last-minute questions. Really appreciate you sticking through and listening to this data nerdy talk today about the Education Data Portal. Please reach out to us again, either via educationdata@urban.org, our GitHub links that you saw in the chat, or to us directly. We have our Data at Urban channel where we write about behind the scenes about some of these things. We have our Education Data Portal newsletter, as Matt mentioned, and our Data at Urban newsletter, where we're putting out a lot of this behind the scenes information and information about the data portal. So be sure, if you're interested in keeping up to speed on what we're doing, to either subscribe or just take a look out for some of these events in the future. But I want to say thank you to everyone for attending, and as thank you, Matt, for putting the link in the chat. And thank you, everyone, for your continued use of the portal. As Matt said, we're very appreciative. We've seen growing use over the last few years, and the impact that you all are making is really impressive. And we just ask that you please let us know. So thanks for your time, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.